Flexi leashes, aka retractable leashes, are one of the most controversial things amongst dog owners and trainers, but are they really all that controversial? Let's jump right into the pros and cons and stick around till the end for the final verdict and when and how this leash might actually be a fit for you. Let's start with the reasons why people hate flexi leashes. One obvious reason is that they can be super dangerous. There was a time when someone's flexi leash wrapped around my leg because they didn't have control around their dog, and when their dog pulled, I got this huge bloody slice in my leg. This is obviously a super negative, and it can also happen to like the legs or bodies of other dogs. Another reason people will say is that when your dog starts running while on a flexi leash and they don't know when the end of the leash is, they can get yanked back really hard and really hurt your dog, especially if they're wearing a collar. That is really my biggest concern with flexi leashes because they tend not to have much stress or reflexibility, so when they do reach the end of the leash, it really hurts them. And to piggyback off that last point, if you say, well, if they start having zoomies, I could just drop the leash and let them run free. This does not work well with flexi leashes because when you drop the handle of a flexi leash, it's so heavy that when it starts chasing your dog, when he pulls the handle of the flexi leash on the ground, it can actually truly traumatize them and make him keep running away from the handle, which obviously they can't run away from the handle since it's attached to them, and that can lead to your dog running into the street or something really dangerous. Another con of retractable leashes is that they tend to be less sturdy than normal leashes for big pullers. Even if the leash says it can handle up to X amount of weight, I wouldn't trust a flexi leash if I had like a 60-pound dog that really pulls. And lastly, for the cons, flexi leashes are really bad for training your dog not to pull because a retractable leash basically enforces that if your dog pulls, the leash will stretch with him. And let's not forget that if your dog is at the end of the flexi leash, it's a lot harder to control him in an emergency like near a road or if a dog pops out from behind the corner. Okay, so I basically laid out how awful flexi leashes are, but to tell you the truth, I'm not 100% against these retractable leashes. The obvious benefit is that your dog can have more freedom without the risk of being completely off leash. And yes, I always say in my videos that you can do that with long leashes, but sometimes a long leash is really annoying to manually adjust the length if your ground is wet or something. So my final verdict is flexi leashes are great, but only for specific situations. So let's talk about the criteria. First of all, if your dog pulls on the leash, forget about using a flexi leash. A flexi leash is an awful tool to teach your dog not to pull, and if you do let your dog pull and you're not trying to train them out of it, it's still not a good idea because the sturdiness level, like I said before, is simply not trustworthy enough. Secondly, if you see other people or dogs often on your walk, like on a sidewalk or urban area, again, forget about using a flexi leash. Like mentioned earlier, if the leash gets caught on someone or another dog, it can be super dangerous, so this leash only really works when you're in a rather rural area. Thirdly, if your dog is a puppy, I strongly advise against this because puppies are less reliable to walk nicely on these sorts of leashes, so start with a normal leash or a long leash with puppies to teach them how to walk nicely on a leash. Then you can use a flexi leash in the future maybe. Another point too, if you are to use a retractable leash, is to always use a harness. Like I said before, if your dog does happen to run to the end of the leash, which you never know might happen randomly, even if your dog is like a perfect angel, if they're wearing a collar, when they get yanked back, it could actually result in like a collapsed trachea, or you could send them into a coughing fit. It's just not a nice thing. So a harness, I believe in harnesses always, but especially with a retractable leash, use a harness. Lastly, it depends on the kind of flexi leash. I have a great retractable leash where the leash isn't a thin string, which is the most dangerous when it gets wrapped around someone. So I'd recommend something like the leash I have here. Another thing is to not get a flexi leash that has like 40 feet in it. A flexi leash is more for a dog that stops every now and often to sniff or walk a few feet ahead of you, not for your dog to be walking a mile in front of you or behind you. So look for a retractable leash that's like 6 to 10 feet maximum to keep it fun but also safe. Like I said, if your dog pulls, flexi leashes are probably not for you. But check out the video linked here on the screen to learn how to stop leash pulling.